100 years ago, World War I was raging. At the height of the conflict, the British and the French met secretly in order to divvy up the spoils in the Middle East after the war would end. This became known as the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and we're about to mark its 100th anniversary. Today, when we look at the Middle East and we see so many problems, many people suggest if it weren't for that Sykes-Picot Agreement, if it weren't for the imperial drawing of new borders and boundaries, the Middle East might be a very different place. All of this begs the question, what if the Middle East borders were redrawn? There's all numbers of ways in which this could have been done. So what if the borders were drawn on ethnic lines? Everyone remembers the story of Lawrence of Arabia and his great Arab revolt. He had promised the Arabs a state, and you know, many of the Arabs expected a single state for all the Arabs in the region. It was Sykes-Picot that dashed those hopes, as well as conflicting promises to others. However, are all Arabs the same? In 1952, Gamal Abdel Nasser overthrew the Egyptian monarchy, and Egypt became the seat of hotbed Arab nationalism. That's the idea that the Arabs should have a single state, and many of the borders and boundaries should be erased. Did it really work? Well, Egypt tried to unify with Syria, but frankly, the cultural and political differences between Egypt and Syria were just too much. Likewise, at various points in time, Jordan and Iraq tried to unify, and that didn't work. If you go across the Arab world, from Casablanca to Cairo, and from Baghdad to Beirut, many of the Arabs in the various states can't even understand each other's dialects. There's that much difference. If there's one thing in the Middle East, no one is defined by one variable. No one's simply just an Arab, or just a Jew, or just a Shiite, or just a member of this tribe, or just a member of that family. Everyone has a much more complex identity, and it can lead to a rapid division of any polity based solely on ethnicity. So what if the Middle East borders were drawn on the basis of religion? You got the three big monotheistic religions in the region. You got Judaism, you got Christianity, and you got Islam. But who speaks for each? And when it comes to Islam, we all hear about the divisions between the Sunnis and the Shiites, and those divisions don't seem to be coming to a conclusion anytime soon. If you're going to divide states on the basis of religion, well, first of all, what happens to the minorities in any of those religious states? Are they going to have any rights whatsoever, or do they have to move? In effect, would we have a new round of sectarian cleansing? Just think about the Islamic State for a moment. They killed the Shiites, enslaved the Yazidis, and sent the Christians packing. Is that really what the rest of the Middle East wants? One of the other problems with dividing the Middle East on the basis of religion goes back to the confluence of geography and history. One valley could belong to one minority, another valley could belong to another, and the third one could belong to the first minority all over again. So to draw these borders just on the basis of religion would be very difficult. What if the Middle East borders were redrawn on geographic lines? Is there any natural way to do it? First of all, most of the population of the Middle East lives along the coast or they live along rivers. And so what you have when you go across the broad swath of the Middle East are very heavy concentrations of population, followed by hundreds of miles of very little. So let's think about these population centers. You have the Nile River and you have the Fertile Crescent. Well, that's Egypt and Iraq right there. You have the Mediterranean coast. Well, that's Israel, the Palestinian territories, Lebanon, and Syria. Then you have all the states that exist in the Persian Gulf. Oman, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. Could there be some redivisions there? Absolutely. Here's the thing. If you were going to redraw the borders based on geographic grounds, they'd probably end up looking not dissimilar to what we have now, where you have states surrounding the population centers, and then you have borders drawn somewhere out in the desert simply to divide one from another. What about all those people who say that the states of the Middle East are artificial? Well, to some extent that could have been true 100 years ago, but is it really the case today? 100 years is a long time, and Jordanians, Iraqis, Egyptians, Saudis, Lebanese, they've all developed unique identities. Even if you were to redraw the borders, would those identities that are based on 100 years of common history, of literature, of language, of TV shows, really go away? The answer to that is probably not. When people study the Middle East, let alone live there, it's hard to emerge optimistic. After all, this is a region with myriad problems that always seem to be on the verge of boiling over. But if the past 100 years have taught us anything, it's that there probably isn't any magic formula. So should the Middle East have new borders? Should a century of Sykes-Picot be put in the dustbin of history? Let us know what you think in the comments, and let us know any other topics you might want us to cover in AEI's What If series.